Verti's this podcast disclaimer: the information presented in this podcast is for entertainment, informational, and educational purposes only. It is not intended as legal, professional, or financial advice and should not be construed as such. Content and topics shown or discussed may not be accurate nor up-to-date information. Laws and regulations change frequently and vary by location, jurisdiction, and by nation. You should consult with a qualified legal or financial professional for advice specific to your situation. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. The views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not reflect the views of the podcast as a whole. The host is not responsible for any errors or omissions in the information provided or for any actions taken based on the content of this podcast. We are not liable for any losses, damages, or consequences arising from the use of this information. By listening to this podcast, you agree to hold the host and any guests harmless from any decisions you make, or from any losses, damages, or other claims arising from the use of this information.
All right, we're back. So I think you have a topic or something that you want to talk about. So I'll pass it over to you.
So with the recent news of MicroStrategy being out there in the forefront of all the financial news that's out there right now, all the stocks have been going up in the last couple of days, maybe a week or week and a half. Things have been on a rally, but what has made the news the most, especially related to Bitcoin, is MicroStrategy. And of course, myself and maybe other people out there as well, maybe asking the question, what's up with MicroStrategy? Why are they in the news so much right now? And, what's causing their stock prices to go up so much? Just wanted to kind of get an idea, like maybe a breakdown of your thoughts about this.
Yeah, and honestly, again, I mean, for folks that are listening, not financial advice is never financial advice. And then full disclosure, I hold MicroStrategy shares, so there's a bias there too, right? So keep that in mind. And again, I'm no expert. I'm just another pleb, and so if folks want to really get the juicy tidbits, the technical details about why MicroStrategy or why not, for that matter, definitely go check out Quant Bros on YouTube, right? That's Rye Quant and Punter Jeff on Twitter or X. But the long and short of it is, and the Quant Bros always talk about this, is the reflexivity, right? It's basically, in short, in a way, I guess you can look at it as almost like a feedback loop or an infinite loop. Some folks in the media space have been calling it a infinite money glitch, which is interesting. Yeah. And Saylor's talked about that recently in his interview. I forgot her name. She's got a YouTube podcast as well I think she's from Australia or New Zealand or something like that.
Yeah, New Zealand.
Was it?
Yeah, I think I saw that too.
I think it was Madison and the Markets or something like that. I'm probably butchering it. And in there, Saylor talks about he doesn't consider it a money glitch, and I think folks generally call it a money glitch because maybe for the bunch of us that play games, right? Who doesn't know what a money glitch is, right? That's when you get infinite money. And that's the concept. And so it's not really a money glitch. Again, it's more so the fact that, as I've worded it before in my own terms, is I think of MicroStrategy as being a vortex, or some people call it a black hole, right? Black holes suck in light and goes somewhere else, potentially. No one's been through a black hole, so no one can really say. But it goes somewhere else, potentially. And so the concept is that MicroStrategy acts like a fiat black hole where it sucks in all the fiat money. And what Michael Saylor and company are doing is they're transforming it into Bitcoin via basically using that stock premium, right? So what do we mean by that? Well, when MicroStrategy buys Bitcoin and puts it on their balance sheet, the market is saying that, this is not just a software company. We value this company because it is holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Now, there's a lot of naysayers that say, well, that makes no sense. Why is it that if a company puts a specific asset on their balance sheet, all of a sudden they're worth more, right? So there is a counter argument to that. But the folks that are for it, they're basically saying, nope, we believe that, by putting Bitcoin, and Saylor calls it like the best commodity there is, right? The purest form. By putting that on the balance sheet, as Bitcoin goes up, you cannot value the Bitcoin on balance sheet at the same price that it was bought anymore. It must reflect the market value, right? It's gone up, right? So in theory, you could have, a company can buy gold if gold performed the same way in terms of the way the value increases, or potentially if you could cap the amount of gold that can be produced and had the same properties as Bitcoin, right? Limited supply, easily transferable, easily verifiable. If it had all those properties, then arguably people could buy gold, CEOs and companies could buy gold, put it on their balance sheet, and when gold's price rose, their value of that company would also rise. Why? Well, because they're holding a commodity that's gone up, right? You have to refactor that, right? And so the people that believe in this, a lot of them potentially are Bitcoiners. They're basically saying, well, I'm already a Bitcoiner. I already buy Bitcoin because I value Bitcoin's potential, current value, and future value, right? And for a company as deep and invested as MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor are in doing the same thing and putting on their corporate balance sheet, that says to a lot of Bitcoiners that, well, this person understands what we understand. They see things the same way. Michael Saylor is a hardcore Bitcoiner, right? He's not just saying it, he's doing it. A lot of Bitcoiners feel that, you know what, if anyone's going to be talking or representing the space to a degree or being a talking head, then it would make sense that as long as Michael Saylor continues to do what he does with MicroStrategy, the value of that company should go up. There's no reason why it should be evaluated at the same original stock price, right? And so that's the argument. Yeah. So I'll stop there for a second.
So then the question is then, well, what if the company held other commodities or other assets?
Right.
Wouldn't that also allow them to benefit from the same type of evaluation and growth?
Oh, you mean if other companies held Bitcoin as well?
Yeah,
is that what you're okay?
No, let's
or
say,
just different commodities.
Let's say they held real estate, but they went out to bought like a whole bunch of real estate, in a very affluent or very sought after marketplace. How's that differ from what MicroStrategy is doing or Michael Saylor is doing?
Right.
Than these other companies that might invest their capital in other ways as well.
That's an excellent question. And so this is something that Michael Saylor has answered himself. He basically says, when you buy cyberspace property, you don't have a landlord, you don't got to pay rent, you don't have to pay upkeep.
Right.
Once you buy it, it's yours. You have full ownership, and you can send it anywhere at lightning speed, anytime you want. Compare that to a commercial building or housing or whatever type of real estate. You can't do that. And so therefore, at least for real estate as a commodity, if it is one, that's the drawback. It doesn't have the same benefits. So that's why my original example is, if gold, the closest one would be if gold had the same properties as Bitcoin, then in theory, the argument would be, well, a company could hold gold, and in theory, that it should work the same way. And I would agree if that was the case, right? If gold worked exactly the same way as Bitcoin does, or did, or does, then arguably that company's value would go up, because as gold's value goes up, then obviously that corporation has to reevaluate, or the market has to reevaluate whether that corporation is worth more money or that company is worth more money, because what they're holding has gone up in value, right? A lot of times the things that they hold, I guess traditionally speaking, right, or from the way, hopefully I'm not butchering it, the way Michael Saylor explains it is, a lot of things that companies hold on their balance sheets don't hold value over time, like they slowly leak, or if they hold value, it doesn't grow, it doesn't increase in value, right? Or if it does, it's at a very slow rate, right? Like gold, right? And gold goes up, but you have to wait like, I don't know, 10, 15 years, and it goes up a bit, right? Depends on the economy.
So I guess the reason, like what I'm trying to say is, I guess the reason why Michael Saylor is not holding, say, real estate as an investment or as a commodity or as a collateral versus Bitcoin is because the potential of growth and the scarcity of it is the asset that he's looking for, compared to holding real estate or gold, etc. Is that true?
Yes, in general, yes, but at the same time, it goes back to there's no upkeep, right? There's no maintenance. You don't gotta fix anything. You don't need to look for tenants to rent it. You don't have to worry about people not paying their rent. It's trouble free. It's hands off. You don't gotta do anything with it. You just leave it, right? And so that's the concept. Now, of course, the other side of the coin is, people will argue, well, how do you know Bitcoin's gonna keep going up? It could go down. Yeah, of course, right? And then that's why also there's the FASB accounting, right? Which is an updated accounting approach. Because in the past, without the FASB accounting rules updated, it did not count Bitcoin as it didn't evaluate Bitcoin on the balance sheet properly. So if the price of Bitcoin dropped, the company would have to report the loss. But if the value of Bitcoin went up, the company could not report that the value went up. So it was negative only.
Yeah.
And still, so they've changed the rules. I forgot starting when, I think since 2023 sometime. And then by 2025 Q1, if I remember correctly, all companies must realign to that new accounting, meaning they have to report when it goes up and they have to report when it goes down. So
that makes sense.
It makes sense.
That's
right.
That's more balanced. Yeah.
And so that's why traditionally, I think all companies except MicroStrategy did not want to touch Bitcoin, because they knew that if they put it on their balance sheet and it goes down, the biggest fear is, what if it goes down more? Then I have to keep reporting a loss, and then every quarter, earnings wise, it's a negative. They don't want to touch that. But the way Michael Saylor and their company looked at it was, well, sure, it will go down. It's volatile. Yes, Bitcoin is volatile, but their belief is over time, Bitcoin will go up. And so, so far it's worked out well, right? That's kind of how we can look at it.
Just a quick update. We were talking about, I think the most recent interview was with Markets with Madison.
Yes,
I think
the
person's name was Madison Reedy. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. Reedy or Reedy? Yeah, Reedy, I think it's pronounced. Yeah, just wanted to update that part there.
That's a great interview. People should check out that interview. Yep.
Yeah. So then going back to its recent meteoric rise in their stock market pricing, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think there was two stages, and it's very interesting. So we dial it back from our current date about 5 days ago. I think, was it last Friday? It basically was last Friday. There was some type of I guess people felt it looked like a little bit of a short squeeze, and so all of a sudden MicroStrategy's price shot up to, like, I think at the highest it was $225 per share. It shot up from, I think originally at least I think a month back, the lowest point. And you can double check me on this with the charts.
Google shows 212 US dollars as the
closing
previous 5 days.
Sure.
The most recent, it's at, I don't know. It's weird. It's not. It's showing the average, I guess. So it's not showing. I did see it though. I did see it hit 225, but 218.65 was supposed to be the high point. And that doesn't quite. But anyways,
I guess so depends on like which chart approximately. Yeah, but totally. if we went back, if we went back a month though, the price dropped all the way down to 118.
Yes.
Right. And so a lot of people were like, oh no, what's going on? Humming and hawing. But at the same time, Bitcoin's price was also around what was it? 61, 62?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
61, 62,000. So it was reflective, right? And then the weird thing that happened, which is again talking back to last Friday's squeeze, so to speak, was Bitcoin's price didn't really change. It stayed around 62, 63. But then all of a sudden, MicroStrategy's share price just shot up from 118 all the way to 225. Now, that was interesting. Why? Because traditionally speaking, when Bitcoin's price moves, whether it's up or down, MicroStrategy's share prices follow.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
But there was a break.
So much of it.
Right, but there was a break in that pattern where Bitcoin didn't do anything, and MicroStrategy's shares shot up, and then that caught a lot of attention. Right. A lot of media started reporting more on it, and then people got excited. It's definitely exciting. And I think what followed after that was there's a lot of people, and the interesting thing was there were we can't really quantify a lot, but I guess based on what I saw on Twitter of people reporting it, there were a certain amount, I guess, of Bitcoiners that even though MicroStrategy and Bitcoin are in the same direction, there's alignment there, right? You want a corporation that holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet to do well, right? Because that is the thesis, right? That Bitcoin has value. A company that puts it on their books should have value. That's not the problem. That's not what they're disagreeing about. What their disagreement was on the MNAV or net asset value multiple, right? And so, for example, if people, folks will have to look this up because I can't possibly explain all the terms because I'm not a pro either. Nvidia, I think, has a MNAV, net asset value multiple of like something crazy, like 32 times or something like that, like based off of their net asset value, but their share price is like, I don't know, 32 times more than what their net asset value is. So the MNAV is 32x, right? And so no one seems to have a problem with that. But here we have MicroStrategy and their MNAV multiple, I think, went from 2 to 2.6 or something like that. Maybe close to 3. Don't quote me on it, but that's approximately what I remember. And some of the Bitcoiners had a concern. They were like, well, why should MicroStrategy shares have an MNAV of anything greater than Bitcoin? It at best it should be 1-to-1. And to me that doesn't make sense because 1-to-1. The reasoning, if I understand it correctly, is well, Bitcoin's value is this, so therefore, if you took the same amount or same number of Bitcoins that MicroStrategy holds, and then you do the math on it, it should be worth whatever their company's worth plus the amount of Bitcoin they have, right?
Right.
But because of the MNAV, it's actually worth more than it is compared to Bitcoin. And so the problem here is they're saying if it takes you, let's say for example, I'm doing wild numbers here, right? Approximate. I think if you do like 1,000 shares of MicroStrategy, right now MicroStrategy shares are at what, 212? Let's say
approximately.
Let's say they're $200 a share, and you need 1,000 shares to equate to having one whole Bitcoin, and you don't even have the Bitcoin. Let's keep it honest, folks. They're basically saying based on the number of Bitcoin MicroStrategy holds, divide by the total number of shares. Each share represents a fraction or a number of sats, a certain number of sats, like 0.0 whatever of Bitcoin. And so people like to do these funny mathematical gymnastics, and they say, okay, well, that means if you were to buy 1,000 shares of MicroStrategy, it'll cost you 200 times 1,000. What is that? 200,000? Yes, 200,000. Why don't you just take the 200,000 buy Bitcoin instead? Because you get more Bitcoin, right? Because straight up, you get more Bitcoin. You don't have to get the point whatever per share. That's true, but at the same time, that's valid. I don't think I can argue that. I'm not the right person to argue that, but I just think that to me, it's like, okay, that's one way to look at it. But at the same time, you have to factor in that it's not just the Bitcoin, it's also the company and what they're doing with it, right? That I think that therein has value. To me, it does. Like Michael Saylor going on podcasts telling people this is what he's doing. He goes and does it, and then he makes his shareholders richer. Well, why is that a problem? Like that's the part where I'll hand it over to you.
I don't think anyone's arguing that about the part that it's making the money. I think what people are trying to point out maybe is because like they don't understand. And I was thinking about this, and we had to talk about it before as well too. We were saying like how a company and what's its value is really dependent on or has a big impact by who's leading that company, right? Look at Apple, for example. When Steve Jobs came back in the day, he righted the ship and made things more valuable. He made a brand out of Apple like it was never seen before. I feel also, and of course, full disclosure, I do also hold MSTR as well, that it really depends on who's at the helm and what they're leading. And one good thing, or at least so far, there's no deception that's evidence, is that Michael Saylor is very clear and transparent on his actions and his motives, and he hasn't deviated from that. And that's important because if there is no trust, which in these days there's very little of in terms of like social media and stuff like that, especially with people holding power and money, and he definitely has both. If they are not fully transparent, it's hard to have that built up of a following or of in this case it's people voting with their wallets. They're buying shares of MicroStrategy. Now, whether people in there are buying it for the flip or buying it for actual believing in the company making headways, I tend to be the latter. I believe that he has his way of, like you said, plan for using Bitcoin to make it work. That makes the company more valuable. So overall, like that's where my view is like who's at the helm of the company, which then leads me to another part. Sorry, I don't want to deviate from our topic because it's really good, but it's that, well, what if MicroStrategy's leader, Michael Saylor, right now is no longer the person in charge? Would that change the company dramatically, or does he have a plan for that as well? Because people don't live forever, just like Steve Jobs couldn't,
right?
So he tried to carry on as long as he could, right?
Yes, and let me answer before I answer this one, or from my perspective. Let me add to what you were saying. Exactly that. Apple, right? How many times has Steve Jobs or Tim Cook been on a podcast? I think you can probably count the number of times, right? It's not bad, right? But definitely nowhere near what Michael Saylor is doing. Michael Saylor is on CNBC. He's on every podcast that he can get on. He's on it. And he keeps talking about what he's doing, what he's going to do, what his plans are. That transparency is huge, right? And he's not just saying one thing and doing something else. When he says it, he actually does it. So what, like, how does it get any better? But let's ask ourselves, how many CEOs out there in the S&P 500 are jumping on podcasts to tell people what they're going to do? That's not normal, right? Those folks like to keep things too close to their chest, to their heart. And they'd rather not tell you their strategy, right? But from Michael Saylor's perspective, he's encouraging other corporations to do the same, but they just haven't responded. I mean, some have, but I would say not very many. As we talked about in our previous podcast about MSTR, the only one closest right now is Metaplanet in terms of following the same structure and process and steps. Other companies like Semler, they've started. There's also Fold and Mara, right? But they're not exactly executing it to a T. The only one that's doing it well is Metaplanet, and Metaplanet is making some waves again, as we've talked before in the Japanese market. Now, to your latter question, sorry, you're gonna have to remind me a little bit. What was the latter question?
Well, it was basically who's at the helm, right? Who's in control?
So yes,
right.
So Saylor actually answered this question, and it's a really good question because it comes to everybody's mind, and it shows that he's thinking about it too. This was in a podcast that he did with Matt Odell over at Bitcoin Park, and this was about, I want to say it's about maybe a month ago, approximately, sometime summer this year. Where he literally said that he's either he has or will, I forgot which one it is. He's gonna set up a trust, and basically all his Bitcoin is gonna go towards whatever charity of his choosing or something along those lines, right? Don't quote me. People go and watch it yourselves, right? He also said that the folks that are driving the company, right? Because he's not CEO, he's executive chairman, but Fong Lee is CEO. The entire board, they're all Bitcoiners, right? The CFO, CTO, I mean, butchering some of the C-suite labeling, but all of the C-suite, they're all Bitcoiners. So it's pretty clear from what Michael Saylor said that even if he wasn't around, there's no reason for the C-suite, the existing C-suite, to not continue doing what they're doing. I mean, it just makes no sense for anyone to stop, right? Like, if you've got a machine or a black hole that converts fiat to Bitcoin and it's making your shares go up in value, why would you not keep doing it? Doesn't matter who drives it. Now, I agree with you. is everyone as good as Saylor getting on a podcast where the man can talk for like 30 minutes without drinking a sip of water and doesn't even have to stop the hosts a lot of time, don't interrupt him because he can just keep going by himself. And that's the amazing thing about Michael Saylor. He has the ability. He is a showman, right? In the sense that he can talk the talk, but he also walk the walk. And that's huge. I'll go back to you.
Right. No, that's a good thing to kind of emphasize on in terms of like who's following his strategy right now and who isn't. And so I guess what leads up to that point, or then maybe a segue into it, is that why aren't more people following in his footsteps? I mean, he's showing right now. I know MetaPlanet is one of them that's been doing it, and there's a specific person they hired on. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person that's leading the.
Dylan LeClaire.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure they need people that are kind of like specialized and experienced in what Michael Saylor is doing to kind of help the company steer that way. But as far as I'm aware, Michael Saylor has been very open and forefront with how to do things taxation wise. He's basically giving the stuff out for free. Why aren't more companies, you think, are not quickly following in his footsteps? And if that is the case, does that make Michael Saylor not special anymore in the marketplace? Let's say people do come around, have more value than Michael Saylor in terms of like their company, right? They can buy more Bitcoin. Isn't Michael Saylor afraid of that and losing the edge?
I think Saylor actually might have answered this in the Madison interview. But if not, other folks have talked about it, like the Quant Bros, where for one thing, even in online media, I think in some of the investor articles out there, they're basically saying it's no secret. MicroStrategy already has more than 1% of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Now, you're right. You could have Apple or the Nvidias or whatever take their cash flow and buy Bitcoin, and they can catch up. But here's the catch, and to answer your question is, they would have to convince their entire all their shareholders, the majority shareholders, and the C-suite all have to be aligned in order to do it. Because like we have to remember that Michael Saylor has, I think, at least 51% voting rights over MicroStrategy.
Okay,
so he has final say.
The power. Right.
So he has. It's his company, right? Basically, so he has final say. And so, like, obviously, if his C-suite and his board members weren't on board, so to speak, there would be a lot of pushback, but he could still push it through, right? But if the same thing would happen in, say, Nvidia or Apple or whatever, or Microsoft, it wouldn't fly, because a lot of the shareholders or stock, like the majorities, they'll be like, vote on it, and they're not Bitcoiners, right? They're like, we don't believe in this. This is risky. No way, right? Why do we need to do that? And that's another thing. If they're already in the trillions of dollars, like Nvidia, why in their minds, if we put ourselves in their minds for a second, if I already got $1 trillion company, why do I need to go and put Bitcoin on my balance sheet? What incentive is there for me to do it? Now, yes, there is a possibility that I could catch up to Michael Saylor, and I could maybe surpass Michael Saylor and have more Bitcoin, and I could do the same play. But is it worth my while? Because there's a risk, right? What if my stock drops, right? Like, is it worth me risking my so-called my jade vase for a porcelain vase, right? Like, there's that sense of maybe that sounds like fun, that sounds cool, but why do I need to do it, right? And it always dials back to the people that are rich. They don't need Bitcoin because they already got money. So to tell them, well, you can get more money, well, I already got a lot. So, I mean, I'm good, right? Like, talk to me when I need more money, right? And so those people will never catch on to the concept as to, hold up, let's put money aside. Let's look at what's going on here, right? I think it's capturing a lot of attention. And the thing is, bull run hasn't really even started yet. We're just starting to see the initial indicators like, oh, something's happening. And those, the squeeze to 225 or whatever about 5 days ago for MicroStrategy's share price. And then for it to then drop back down to about I think it was 190 maybe 183 at the lowest midweek, and then shoot back up this Friday to 212. That's bonkers. I mean, of course, what happened this week was Bitcoin went from, I think, 63K up to, what is it now, 68K USD?
Yeah, around 68.
So there's that factor, right? Where Bitcoin rose, and of course, MicroStrategy rises with it. Whether people want it to happen that way or not, the market dictates, right? Market says it's worth more because it has Bitcoin, therefore it should rise that much more according to when Bitcoin rises, or drops that much more when Bitcoin drops. But there's a thing it's happening regardless of people. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, a quick aside, and I think this is totally something not related. Well, sort of related. The bull market for Bitcoin has been delayed, I think, right, in most people's eyes. Is that right? Because I think originally it was supposed to be throughout this year, but of course there was a lot of things that kind of either suppressed it or you know, I don't say derailed, but like it hasn't really come fully yet, because I think the projections were at least to hit, like, I think USD for BTC should be about 100,000 this year, but
end of year, I think.
End of year, but we're getting close. We're getting close to end of year. It doesn't seem
that's
like
true.
It would. I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, like, because Bitcoin runs in these cycles, could it be that it would be sort of dragged out and see more action in the? I mean, I know it's anyone's guess,
sure,
but is that what the sentiment is out right now in the marketplace?
I honestly, I've read. I think I've read a little bit of both, right? I mean, there are folks that say the cycle usually aligns with election time. So we're not quite at election, but we're getting close. I think election time is, correct me if I'm wrong, sometime, is it mid-November or around there?
Yeah, it's November something. If something like that. Yeah.
So the folks are saying in the past, at least in the past cycles, after the
November
halving,
5th, sorry.
5th?
November 5th,
so it is coming up pretty soon.
Yeah.
Okay, that's exciting. That's exciting. So they say usually it will align with the election, and once the election is done, then the price shoots up. Now, of course, there are slight variations in the past. I think in the past cycles, I'm not expert either, we'd have to look at the charts, but I think in some circumstances it probably started going up more before the election, and then in some situations maybe it went up after the election. But again, you're right, like, it's anybody's guess. I don't think everyone's just guessing, right? That's the whole point. No one really knows. I think OGs tend to feel or want to think that, as we mentioned before, things usually rhyme if it doesn't exactly repeat. It's very hard to break out of that thinking. Even what's it? The person with the carrot icon, Root, Rational Root. I think he calls himself Rational Root. He's got a spiral chart, right, which shows all of the cycles. And he mapped it in the recent Bitcoin Amsterdam conference. He mapped it to the famous stock market cycles, like the euphoria, the panic, and all the different phases. So he mapped that to the spiral chart to show you the approximate time period and the historical pattern of whether Bitcoin has been doing that. And Bitcoin has been following that pretty closely, whether we like it or want it to or not, for the last 15 years. So to think that all of a sudden Bitcoin won't, is like, okay, that's a possibility, right? Because obviously this year there's the introduction of the spot ETFs that could change things. And I think to your point, some of the folks feel like, oh, is it the spot ETFs that are holding back the price? Right? I think there's a little bit of that sentiment. People are guessing a little bit about that, but there's no way to know. I just think it's super exciting. Like the fact that the election's coming up, everyone's going to be watching that. The entire world's going to be watching it, right? Depending, I mean, some people say it won't matter. I kind of agree. It doesn't matter in the larger picture or bigger extent. But I think in the nearer term, depending on whether Trump wins or Kamala, obviously Trump has positioned himself to be pro. And so I suspect that if Trump does win, a lot of people are thinking along the same lines, I believe, at least sentiment, Bitcoin's value should shoot up because then people are less afraid to invest in it, right? But on the other side of things, if there's another party that comes in, they're not very in favor of Bitcoin, and we've seen it under the Biden administration. There have been attacks, right? Then people might be less likely to put their money in Bitcoin, and therefore the rally might not happen right away, right? It always boils back down to sentiment, to some degree,
I
right?
just want to add, I just also want to add that it's not unrealistic that Bitcoin jumps a good 10-15% sometimes,
the God candle
out of the blue, and because it just sometimes just happens with the cycles and stuff like that. It's very volatile in that nature. You get both the upside and downside. And so even if at right now where it's sitting at 68,000, you said, right? A good 10-15% jumps it dramatically, and sometimes that happens in a day. And then a few days of that, and you're already close to that. Let's say $100,000 was the so-called mark, right, of what the year's bull run should be. It's it turns really quickly in that aspect of things. So you can never really count it out, even though it's only like 2 months away. Even though I just said that, hey, it's only got 2 months, so-called 2 months left, in the year.
Yeah, it could happen.
And in addition to that, of course, interest rates are supposed to be, further cut as is expected before elections, and that was another main driver that I've been hearing in regards to why markets are rallying. Not just Bitcoin but everything else. So something to just also keep in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. To your point, the dates, right? Powell has to make another speech before the election. That's at the end of the end of October. So that's basically about pretty much next week. Right. So so he's got to, and then things gonna happen, and then so again, whether Satoshi purposely timed it this way, no one really knows. That's a theory, right? It sure works out great because you've got the halving that occurs first, and then you've got the election that takes place approximately, I don't know, was it like 6 months later, right? Like if anyone were to design this, I mean, that would have been pretty amazing to have that as part of the plan. But that's assuming Satoshi was focused on USD, and in part, why not? It is a global currency, so that's a possibility. But I don't think anyone will ever know. But I think, to your point, it's absolutely possible. I mean, we've seen in the prior cycle, Bitcoin was it like 5 digits? No. Or they jumped from 16,000 up to like 30 something at one point, right? It did that huge jump. It's very possible. So and then you have to keep in mind that now we've got the spots in the States. There are Venmo, I read recently, has opened up some way for their users to buy Bitcoin through some partnership on their app or something. So now you've got more rails put in, right? People start seeing Bitcoin go up. What's the first thing they're going to do after or during Christmas dinner, or depending on when that happens, right? The family's getting together. People, that topic of, you're talking about Bitcoin again this year, and then as they're munching on their turkey, and the next thing you know, something happens, and everyone start looking at their phones and like, oh Lord, it went up. Maybe I should buy some. I can do it on Venmo or whatever, right? Like easy, right? Once you have those rails in place, what's holding anyone back? That FOMO was huge. So it's one of those things that I would not discount it. Now, to your point, could it be suppressed and delayed or deferred? That's always a possibility. I mean, again, if it does, then that will be probably the first in of all cycles that it's been delayed or deferred that much. But I think, again, next coming 2 weeks, gonna be very exciting.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of action one way or another. I feel like usually people do say that October is the month where things are rallying up a lot anyways. So there's a lot of upside if that's what is being expected, for both BTC and a lot of other, stock market companies as well too.
I mean, MSTR is going to be fun to watch. I mean, do you think Bitcoin's exciting if MSTR continues its course of trading multiples over their net asset value. Well, wow. As you know, Quant Bros and a lot of folks have said, Saylor hasn't finished buying his 2 billion. He still has 800 million left to execute.
Right.
And so that's coming. We just don't know when. He'll tell us when he's done. But once he does that, we can pretty much be guaranteed, because his mission is to make sure that for each share, the amount of sats accrues, right? Accretes, right? Goes up, right? It does not go down. You can buy one share over time. The amount of Bitcoin it represents increases without you having to do anything. That's why,
unless you buy in late, because as we can see, he splits his stock to buy more, right?
But he's doing it in a calculated way, though. He's not blindly. He's done the math, right? Yeah. So keep going.
I'm not saying he's doing it willy-nilly. I'm saying that yes, he has a purpose of what he's doing it, and I think I'm saying it as it's a good thing, is that if he's rewarding people that are been holding his stock.
Sure.
Because it don't matter if you hold a stock and it splits. That's the thing. That's the whole point.
Right.
Like, because if it splits, you still hold that many shares.
Value-wise, yeah.
That's why he's, in a way, he's also rewarding. Like, from my point of view, it looks like he's rewarding people that are getting on his ship early versus the ones that come in later. Not to say that the ones later won't benefit anyways if his vision comes to fruition. It's just that he is rewarding those that are joining early as well too, is what I can sort of see what his plans are.
Oh yeah. His mission is to increase shareholder value, and he's using that Bitcoin black hole machine of his to do it. And there's no reason for him to stop. Now, there's the theory that, well, as Bitcoin's value goes up, will MicroStrategy be able to borrow more money to keep doing it? What if the hedge funds, institutions, or whatever that are interested in his stock don't give him that as much money, or it doesn't scale according to Bitcoin's value? Well, that's a possibility, but is it happening anytime soon? I'm not too worried about that. Why? Because there's $900 trillion worth of assets out there, right?
Yeah,
and it's gonna take a while. So why are we worrying about something? I mean, if we're gonna worry about that stuff, then that goes along the same list of things that, what if Michael Saylor is not there driving? Okay, let's put that on the list too, right? There's tons of things, and those are valid risks that we have to understand, and whether you want to accept it or not, that's part of it if you're going to buy the shares. But any shareholders should fully understand what are the pros and cons, what are the risks that they are willing to accept by buying and holding the share, right? There's definitely people that are trading it, but those people aren't doing so well. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. It's just I wanted to segue into Michael Saylor's plans with Bitcoin for Bitcoin.
Right.
What is his end game? Because I know that to me was also a very important topic.
Right.
And I wanted to kind of add in my take of what his plans are and how that looks like, and also get your how you think about his plan and strategy, because of what I've worked in the small time frame that I did work in the financial industry. It's very interesting that his outlook for using Bitcoin in creating financial instruments, meaning that he wants to make bonds and other types of vehicles where people can invest in, to cater to the market out there. So, as investors, basically becoming a bank, right? I think is one of the ways he described himself. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and I'll add in my 2 cents afterwards as well too.
Yeah, that's an awesome one. In the recent interview with Madison, he basically said that I might be butchering it a little bit, but I think he said somewhere along the lines that he wants MicroStrategy to be the Amazon of fixed income. And I think a lot of people gravitated to that description. It's awesome. That's an awesome, very interesting way of describing it. But you're right. Like, traditionally speaking, like offering bonds and whatnot is usually seen more from a banking side of things, right? And I think that's why Michael Saylor is using that terminology that, you know, he in one way or another, he kind of foresees that MicroStrategy will be kind of like a Bitcoin bank. But a lot of people, when they hear bank, they're like, wow, aren't we trying to like, you know, get rid of all the banks and like, you know, defund the Fed or get rid of all central bankers and it riles up all the Bitcoiners, right? Because their terminology is fixated on the word banking, right? Banking's corrupt. Why do you want to do it? Yes, well, fully agree, right? As a Bitcoiner, current banking, the way current banks and central banks are run, it's definitely corrupt. But we have to keep in mind that it's the way the fiat system works, right? It's loans on top of loans, right? Rehypothecation. Whereas with Bitcoin, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but in theory, because of Bitcoin's transparency and people over time becoming more knowledgeable of Bitcoin, they will demand that any bank that holds the Bitcoin, they better show it. Because there's no excuse for them to not show that they have the assets. And if any bank cannot do that, you can bet your bottom dollar or your bottom Bitcoin that the Bitcoiners, they're not going to bank there. People are like, forget you. I'm going to go somewhere else.
I don't think they can't. I think they can't hide it because the fact that it's on chain. So
they may not disclose. They may not disclose their addresses, like kind of like a lot of the corporations that hold. Or a lot of the spot ETFs that hold their Bitcoin on Coinbase, they don't tell anyone. Only Bitwise, if I remember correctly, only Bitwise has disclosed their actual address, and people can actually look and check Bitwise's holdings, which is beautiful because that's what people want to see.
But you think that if banks landed themselves on hot water, in which we know they do, I think that legally people can challenge the bank to show their address to show that they have the assets underlying it if it did come down to it.
Sure.
Or it can hide it. You know what I mean? If they're subpoenaed to do so, I believe they could actually like with fiat, you could probably hide it, right? Yeah. Because of the ways that it's stored at this, stored at that.
Right.
It's just that if it comes down to it, it's just so easy. Just like how criminals can't really hide their usage, which is a misconception, right? That, you know, if criminals use Bitcoin and they can hide their activities, that's the opposite.
Right.
If once they find out, they try to cash out, they can't because they know exactly where it is being held, right? So I think it comes down as a double-edged sword. I think that's one of the reasons why some banks and governments as well too are scared of Bitcoin and its technology, is that it is fully transparent.
Oh, sure.
And they can't do a lot of the stuff that they're used to doing that fiat can help them with.
Yeah, like the European Union, I think it was just yesterday, they put out some kind of statement saying that they're gonna do stuff to make it hard for people to buy or hold Bitcoin or whatever, crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Whereas in the States,
they're gonna tax them, right, or something like that.
Italy was one of them where they're gonna increase the tax from 23% to 50 something percent. It's like capital gains. That was crazy, and just because it's Bitcoin. Yeah. Whereas in the States, there are banks that actually do want to hold Bitcoin. And they're pushing for regulation change, right? So as long as the regulation stipulates that they, let's say, for example, the best case scenario is the new regulation comes in and it says any banks holding Bitcoin must show proof of asset, meaning they have to expose and declare to public what their address is. And then the people that bank with them can then check anytime they want to see if the assets are still there. And that creates confidence, right? That builds confidence. Any bank that doesn't do that, right, that doesn't follow regulation, immediately would fail the sniff test for Bitcoiners, right? And so, but that's why a lot of U.S. banks want to push for the regulation change. But of course, the Biden administration shut it down, right? I think Biden himself vetoed that bill that said, no, banks cannot hold Bitcoin, right? A lot of banks actually want to, and they want to do it legitimately. I forgot the lady's name. It's skipping my mind, but she's on Twitter. She has her own, she runs her own bank, and she wanted to basically have a bank that had fully backed in fiat, not even Bitcoin, just fully backed fiat. So there was no rehypothecation. The central bank said, no way. I'm not going to allow you to do it, right? Something along those lines. Caitlin, I forgot her last name. She's awesome. And that's the thing. That's why the whole Bitcoin community is like, why? This bank just wants to make sure that they have 1-to-1 for every dollar their depositors store with them, right?
Right.
And the central banking and the Fed are like not going to open any credit lines to you for doing that. Why? Right? What's the problem? But the problem supposedly is that all the other banks aren't doing that. So if you have a bank that starts doing it, that causes problems, right? Because then all the other people going, well, this bank over here says they have all the assets and they can show it, even if it's fiat, for example. How come my bank can't? And you don't want people asking those questions, right? Especially when their dollar, 90% of their dollars are lent out already. Last thing you want is a bank run, right? And so again, this is all speculation. I don't know how much is true, but we know for a fact that they turned down I think it was Caitlin's bank's request to be fully backed in fiat. So something's wrong there.
Yeah. And circling back to adding a little bit more to MicroStrategy as well too. I think his long-term game being, the bank figure, or being able to let other people sort of invest in his vehicles that he makes. I think that's one of the things that, once again, I found really interesting, is that he's able to create different risk levels of investments within his company, and he's slowly transforming, it seems like, or at least not transforming. He's building, let's say, a department or an arm of his company to handle this type of investment vehicles for clients, right? Because people want low risk and high risk. And well, how do you do that? If you just invest in Bitcoin, there's only one risk, right? It's whether Bitcoin goes up or down. But he's able to issue bonds by borrowing. And then, of course, I think I heard about lending as well too, to mitigate some of those risks, so that he can create these products like sort of like mutual funds, or sort of like bonds, or that people can then safely feel that they can get a certain return from that product that he makes to different groups. He can sell them to retirement funds. He can sell them to people younger that can take on more risk. So I think that's really neat. What are your thoughts about that in terms of like his plans?
Just to clarify, I from what I understand, MicroStrategy does not loan anything out. I think it was speculation on part of the Bitcoin community where they were saying, well, if his company's going to be a bank, does that mean he's going to loan out his Bitcoin? And that's the fear, right? Well, what if he loans out his Bitcoin and then say they loan it to JP Morgan and then JP Morgan doesn't loses it all? Then, well, that's a risk. And there's a lot of that going on. So, but I think to be clear, MicroStrategy has not done any loans. They're simply
he's not lending anything.
But there is talk about in the community speculating that what else is he going to do other than just offer bonds to the hedge funds, treasuries, or investment institutions or whatnot, right? I think in our discussion privately, we're basically saying we're joking around and saying that MicroStrategy is the Bitcoin casino inside the Wall Street TradFi casino. Right? They basically started up their own mini casino house and said, hey, the rest of TradFi doesn't offer this, but we do. If you want to bet against, for or against, and whatever you want to do, go ahead and do options on MicroStrategy. And a lot of investment firms and hedge funds or whatever are taking both sides of that trade, right? But here's the thing. If there are quite a bit of Bitcoiners that are holding MicroStrategy shares, what's going to happen when the people that are shorting it are expecting it to drop? Well, if no one's willing to sell, or the majority of the people who are holding it are not selling MicroStrategy shares, then what's going to happen? So the game theory is that it's going to cause a squeeze, just like GME. The way GME worked was a lot of people jumped in, specifically retail, to take the long side of the bet and saying, hey, we love the stock, we're going to hold it. And the people shorting it, and there's always people that are professionally shorting it, they don't believe that GME had any value, right? They're saying the company is like outdated, still has brick and mortar stores selling video games. No one buys video games anymore, tangible ones. Everyone just downloads it, right? So they're shorting it. They're expecting that company to fold, right? But then they didn't expect all the gamers to jump on and buy the other side of it. And what happened was the gamers held onto the stock. And when it was time for the short sellers to basically their options were expiring, there was nothing. The price did not drop. And that causes a problem for them. Then they have to cover. A lot of them like to naked short, which means they're shorting without even having the stock in hand.
Right.
So that causes a loop, which means they now are forced to buy it at the market price in order to cover their shorts. Right. Now, one of the key reasons why GME didn't keep working that way, although it did well, but then it kind of fell flat. And there's a movie, go watch it. I forgot the name of the movie. It's great. Is because GME stocks aren't limited. Right now, you can make the same argument. Well, MicroStrategy stocks aren't limited. Now, here's the thing: in the recent rally that Roaring Kitty was kind of working on, I guess, or was talking about, it fell flat. Why? Because Ryan Cohen immediately diluted his shares. He offered I forget how many million more shares onto the market right away, and that killed the long trade. Right? People holding it were basically rug pulled. Right? You're expecting that the CEO would be like, yes, let's do this together. Let's hold the value of the company. Instead, he issued a boatload of shares, diluted everybody, and then who won? The short sellers. Right? So how is that fair? Well, okay, let's put that aside. So let's go back to MicroStrategy. Well, what if MicroStrategy or Michael Saylor goes and dilutes like crazy? Yeah, but he's not going to do that. Why? Because he wants to accrete value. And the only time we've seen so far that he actually went and did a share dilution by basically offering a multiple of 10. So if you had 100 shares, after the split, you would have 1,000 shares. He only did that, from my understanding, is because the share price previously went up to almost $2,000 a share. And the only people that could afford it was the investment hedge funds, institutions that were all trading the shorts and stuff, right? And the longs, whatever. But that's expensive. A lot of retail can't afford to do options. And so there were a few people, to give them credit, that were calling out that Saylor's got to do a stock split. He's got to make it cheaper so that retail can jump in and play this game, to play the GME game, right? And so, and for the longest time, I was thinking, well, maybe Saylor doesn't care about that. He only cares about the big money. Well, turns out, and quite happily, I was proven wrong. He actually did split it just by a multiple of 10, bring it down a notch. So instead of $1,000 or $2,000 a share, it went up to like $1,900 a share. He brought it down to $190 a share. Or, well, when it dropped back, it went as low as $118, which, if you translate it back, would have been $1,100 a share. So that's a huge difference, going from having to pay $1,000 to buy in for a share versus $100 to get a share. But that isn't the pie. The pie is the people that couldn't do options can now do options, because, as we all are reminded, when you do options, you have to buy at least 100 shares, allotments of 100 shares. You can't just buy one and go and long it or short it or whatever, right? You have to buy 100 of them. So when you multiply 100 by $100 a share by 100, that's was it $10,000? That's doable. But if you take $1,000 and multiply by 100, that's, what is that? 100,000? Yeah. That's right. So that's out of the normal range of a small retailer, right? Can't do those options. So once he did that split, all of a sudden it opened up the market to the retailers. And we know how powerful that can be, because when you've got a lot of Bitcoiners aren't wealthy, you have to remember that. And so now that we opened up that door, or Michael Saylor has, it allows a lot of the, I guess, more savvy Bitcoiners and investors to jump in and go, now I can do longs or whatever, right? And then I can take the opposite side of what those short, those people that are shorting are, right? Like the folks at Carousel Capital or whatever. There's a bunch of them that do it. They don't believe in MSTR. They don't believe that it should have a MNAV of whatever. They don't even believe in MicroStrategy whatsoever. They just want to see it fail. So they'll go on the short side, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there's that aspect.
They will find the research to prove themselves right, to do the justified short that they need to, because sometimes they do like, sometimes some of the readings they do I feel like do point them in the right direction, but there are just some things that I think I don't know. It's just like they're looking at it differently. Maybe they haven't seen the full picture, or haven't kind of the full review of what Bitcoin is, and so sometimes that kind of skews what they may justify as proper research.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if the people that are shorting it even understand Bitcoin. I mean,
no, that's true.
Arguably, I think the argument is, or my argument would be, if they understood Bitcoin, they probably wouldn't take that trade, right? I mean, why would you do that? Like, if you study Bitcoin, you understood what Bitcoin was meant for and what its purpose is, you would be on the side of Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy because they're literally doing the fastest conversion anyone has ever seen, right? They're forcing traditional finance to funnel fiat through their machine, and out the other side becomes Bitcoin. Now, it doesn't go back into TradFi space. It goes into MicroStrategy, but they're doing that conversion. Whether people like it or not, they're like, hey, you lend me money, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So why fight that? To me, again, I think that really boils down to, the people that are shorting it. Besides the Bitcoiners that don't believe in it, that's a different story. But the people that, the investment firms and whatnot, the hedge funds or whatever, that they're like, why? This doesn't make any sense. And to a large degree, it won't make sense to them because they haven't studied Bitcoin. Now, the other part of it is, well, why do the Bitcoiners do it? If they understand Bitcoin, shouldn't they be on Michael Saylor or MicroStrategy's side of things? In theory, but not everyone has to agree, right? And here's another aspect to take into consideration. A lot of Bitcoiners are worried, I suspect, sentiment-wise, that if too many people degen into the MicroStrategy trade, for one thing, they'll be tempted to trade and lose all their money. And I've seen some of the posts on the Twitter space where basically people are saying, oh, I've sold all my Bitcoin and I've bought MicroStrategy because it goes up faster. And then later, I'm going to buy back Bitcoin. Well, that says to me, those people don't quite fully understand the risk of traditional finance and fiat, right? Yes, your fiat dollars with MicroStrategy goes sky high all the way to moon and to Mars. But if the next day, worst case, hyper Bitcoinization, it won't matter if you have quadrillions of fiat. It won't matter at that point. You'll have it, but you won't be so-called rich in that traditional sense. The people that held onto the Bitcoin will be okay because they basically diversified from that risk, right? So for the folks that are like short term, like, oh, I'm just gonna wait till bull run and then it gets to the top and I'm gonna sell near the top and convert it back to Bitcoin. There's a lot of assumptions there. There's timing that we know for a fact you can't time it. And these people think that that cycles repeat perfectly. They don't. So that's two things already. Why take that chance? So the more reasonable approach that I've seen is hold Bitcoin, right? And if you've got money trapped in the fiat system, such as we've talked about before, IRA, Roth, RSPs.
Or some countries that don't let you.
Yeah,
right?
or
some countries that don't let you buy Bitcoin, right?
UK.
Or tax you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then sure. Go ahead, go do what you need to do with MicroStrategy, right? But nothing beats Bitcoin, right? That's the understanding that should be stressed and should be understood. And so there's a layer of understanding is people should always understand fully what Bitcoin is, why it has value, why it's necessary. And then when they understand that, go and understand what the risks are with MicroStrategy. There are risks, and make sure that those risks are acceptable or at least balanced in the portfolio, and then go ahead and take the appropriate risk that they're willing to tolerate.
We did talk about like if one day Michael Saylor just all of a sudden said like, nope, I'm not playing this game anymore. Like that could happen.
Oh, sure.
He's human, right? Whereas Bitcoin, you can't change what is already said out there. Exactly. So there is risk there, even though it's very not in his best interest.
No, I mean he would get shunned and chased off of planet Earth, but nothing's gonna stop him. He could be like, oh, thanks. I'm gonna do the ultimate rug pull and see you later. Like, haha. What are you gonna do? You can't. You do class action, okay? But he never promised you're gonna get any Bitcoin. You're just holding securities.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
His company holds all the Bitcoin.
Yeah. So he never promised anybody anything. It's very clear that the security that we hold does not equate to Bitcoin, and that is worth reiterating, right? People buying MicroStrategy should not be thinking that this is the same as Bitcoin. It is not the same as Bitcoin. It is a derivative.
Yeah.
Full on. Saylor's been honest about that. And he tells people straight up, don't buy my stock, right? I mean, of course he has to say that legally, right? Because otherwise you get in hot water. But at the same time, he's telling you buy Bitcoin. Like the man is literally telling you to buy Bitcoin. Why are you doing this? So unless you've got money trapped in TradFi that you can't get out until you retire, or you just simply cannot buy spot Bitcoin, sure, go buy MicroStrategy as much as you want, right? Then you got the other side of things where people are even crazier, I guess the more degen, where they buy the MSTX, MSTU, and the 3 LMI, which are like the 1.75x MSTR, 2x MSTR, and 3x MSTR. Wow, how much leverage do you need, right? But those are there from other ETF vehicles and other offered by other investment firms for the purpose of Wall Street and the likes to do their games.
That's right.
Right? That's the intention.
He's
it's
offering
not
the playground. He's offering their playground
exactly
to these folks.
Yep. And so people will do it. And should people be dabbling in that kind of stuff? I honestly, if you don't know what the difference between, long and short and how to do options, then why are you bothering with those things? It's, I think the argument's been made by, I can't remember who, might have been the Quant Bros potentially, or someone else, where they're like, if you can just do options, why not just do options? Why do you need to do like the 2x and the 3x on top of MSTR? You can just do the options on MSTR. But a lot of people don't understand options, right? Myself included. I don't get it's supposed to be not that complicated, but it can be complicated as heck. Reminds me of like craps, right? There's so many different rules, but at the end, it only boils down to a couple things that you really need to know. So I suspect it's kind of like that. But do I want to touch options? No, that's not my thing, because I don't want to do something that I don't understand.
Of course.
So, even MicroStrategy is already like, that's volatility on top of volatility. Is that not good enough? It's already,
Hey, to some it's not, right? To some, that's just not, doesn't scratch the itch. So to each their own. Sometimes you can't really. That's why he makes it so that there's different varieties out there, because he knows people have different needs, right? One way or another, right? So
they're gonna do it
as well
anyways.
just allow you to play the game, and if unfortunately, if you take too much risk and then it doesn't come out quite right, he's not really held responsible, because it's just providing the pieces for you to play with. I think that's a good place to
sounds good.
Call it.
Yeah.
We've kind of discussed quite a bit about MSTR. Hopefully we will have a chance again to talk more about it another time, because it's an ongoing saga of what's coming and more to come.
Yep. Just strap tight and get ready for that rocket blast. That's my perspective. Not financial advice, folks. Not financial advice. All right, take it easy.
All right.